Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to do a little bathrobe conversation. I was thinking about an important day in New York City history that is very good for the entire country, the United States, and I think rather fascinating to other people in the world. And that is an event that hardly anybody in New York City knows about anymore, called Evacuation Day. What is that, you may ask? We use that term, Evacuation Day, as the day in which the British left New York City for the last time. That date was November the 25th, 1783. It's quite a bit after the Treaty of Paris. But you see, the colonists, lost New York City in 1776. And for many years, it was the crown jewel of the colonies for the British military and navy to a degree, because it had a fantastic harbor. And it was also a hotbed of Tory activity anyway. And so the British took over. A number of the people were happy, some were not. Those that were not, a lot of them were imprisoned and put on prison ships out in the harbor, which is horrific, actually. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people died. We never hear about that during the American Revolution. You go to New York, go to Brooklyn, there's a monument that was created by Stanford White, which contains the bones of something close to 9,000 soldiers. I'm not sure the exact amount. 9,000 soldiers, civilians, probably children. But the thing is that they were put on prison ships and in most cases starved to death. It was pretty dreadful. But eventually, Evacuation Day would come, November the 25th, 1783. And the British prepared to leave. George Washington and his army were waiting at the border of the city to give the British the opportunity to leave. And the British did a couple of things that are interesting. First off, slavery was not looked upon kindly in England. And so they offered any of the African Americans that were in the city, if they wished, they could go with the soldiers and the sailors and the ships back to England and gain their freedom. And in many cases, they just freed them and let them go. And one of the major complaints that George Washington has was that you've taken our property, which is a little frightening when you think about it. But nonetheless, the British left and took the slaves and took people and took whoever wanted to go with them. And they set up on the end of the island flagpoles. Now, in those days, flagpoles didn't have pulleys and stuff. You would take nails and tack the flag up on the top of the flagpole. And so they set up several British flags at the end of Manhattan Island and then greased the poles. So you couldn't climb. You'd slide right down. Very clever. But one young, enterprising individual had cleats, and he was able to climb up the poles and rip off the British flags in each pole and then tack on whatever our flag was. And mind you, all of our flags look different. We didn't have a set flag yet. It would take quite a while before that would exactly happen. And the British left. A lot of the folks in Staten Island were making faces and making various hand gestures to the outgoing British. And they say that one captain lost his temper and fired, but the cannonball never flew near the people, but that was the last shot of the American Revolution, if you think about it. Fascinating thing. We celebrate it in New York. On November 25th, there is a bunch of redcoats there preparing to leave. Most people don't know what it's all about. There's another interesting aspect that we celebrated Evacuation Day in New York until 1915. And how did we celebrate? We took a British flag and laid it on the ground, and then everyone walked on it. That's how we celebrated Evacuation Day. We did that till 1915, and in 1915 we're on the same side. So we decided not to make fun of the British anymore. And Evacuation Day became a much more sedate and somewhat forgotten event that was very important in the history of the United States. You know, there is a postscript to this whole thing. You know, after the British left, Washington came in, everything was fine. And then, a couple of decades later, we got into the War of 1812. And the British adored Manhattan. The British loved everything about it. They loved its seaport. They loved everything about it. And so when the War of 1812 started, the first thing that happened in New York City was, holy cow, the British are going to come back. And if you do come to New York City, you will notice where the Statue of Liberty is. You will look over at Governor's Island, and you will look at the tip of Manhattan, and you'll see another fort. There were 3 forts built to protect the harbor from an onslaught of British ships. Well, that never happened. The British never came. But it's an interesting thing to know about. Evacuation Day. The last day that New York City, after the American Revolution and after peace had been signed, the last time that New York City was under British rule, November the 25th, 1783. Thank you.